So, one question that we get frequently is food and why use food. So we're going to get into that now. So, the main question when it comes to food is, why should we use food? There's problems with food. There's the camps that love using food. So, here's how I'll explain the use of food with detection dogs from my point of view. So, the first thing I look for, I should say, is I got to know my dog. What is my dog motivated by? Is my dog a really highly motivated food dog? Is my dog not super motivated for food? What types of food could my dog be motivated for in comparison to something else? Is my dog motivated by a toy or play item? What's that level of motivation? So, hierarchy of reward is one of the first things that I look for and I test with my dog. I look and see what toys highly motivate my dog, what types of toys do they like most, so I can utilize that in my system. Also look at the types of food. Is it just something as simple as kibble? Or is it hot dog, chicken, liver, all of the different things out there. So once I kind of establish what is the most motivating thing for food, I then utilize food. I think one of the common things that people get confused about when we talk about food for training and detection and things like that is food is used as the only thing that is used in that, let's say, detection. And the only time the dog gets food is during training. And that could be something that becomes a problem because at that point we are working a survival instinct more so than we are using it for a motivational aspect. And you have to understand there's desire for food and survival for food, and depending on how you use it, that can be an area of what you might see a problem develop. So why use food? So for me, why I will use food at times depending on that dog in front of me is it allows me to have flexibility with keeping a dog under a threshold. So some dogs become very highly motivated for toy, and that's a great thing, and I like that. But sometimes that threshold goes over. That dog becomes so motivated for that toy item that they can't focus, or I can only get a couple good reps out of it. The utilization of food, I'm able to actually put repetitions in, keeping that dog under threshold. The dog can do rep 1, rep 2, rep 3, rep 4, maybe rep 5 with the food, depending on the stage of training I'm in. And then that last repetition is a jackpot repetition with their toy item, whether I'm allowing them to go over threshold or reach a higher state of motivation, and it doesn't affect the outcome or the procedure of my training. Also, knowing that dog's motivation for a toy, sometimes, again, like I brought up a second ago, that toy motivation is so high, it brings them to a point where they're no longer mentally flexible. They're so motivated or aroused by that toy item, they can't focus on, let's say, solving a problem or searching better or searching more methodically. And again, this isn't every dog. This is just, I'm giving examples of dogs where the repetition with utilizing a toy becomes more problematic, and here's how I'll use the food. So that's some of the why. When I use it, again, depends on that dog in front of me. I want that dog in front of me to get the most out of its learning cycle, and I want it to be efficient at its learning cycle. So again, keeping that dog within a normal working realm, sometimes that food gives me a skill. So another aspect that we were asked about in the same questions regarding food was, okay, what should we use it, or what's the difference between using it between puppies and adults? So puppies may not view a toy at the same level as they view the food item. And in those early stages, I could utilize food to teach certain skill sets that may come into play later on in detection. Early on, I'm not doing any detection and I'm not using food. I'm using the food to teach the vocabulary of detection. And what I mean by that is the dog does hunting games. Or maybe it's hunting games are happening while there's a stressor going on. Maybe it's a noise, maybe it's the environment, maybe it's whatever I want to come up with. So the food is highly motivated for that young pup, but I'm saying puppy, and I'm using the term puppy to go between 8 to 16, 20 weeks old. I'm not talking a dog who's 10, 12 months old and still calling it a puppy. This is going to be definitely the definition of weeks old kind of category. So with that food, I can utilize that as an aspect to keep a dog at that very beginning stages, learning some critical skills, and food's just already a motivator, and I'm playing that to my advantage and using it as a tool in that way. With an adult, the food is going to be utilized in the way I just gave the description. It's to help with motivational threshold shifts, mental flexibility and repetition. That's where I can utilize food. But like I said, in those examples, I still use toy. So toy is what I use at a jackpot. So that leads to another part of the question when it comes to food is, well, if I use food in detection, how do I, or what do I do to proof a dog off of food? I have many instructional videos coming out. Those that come to my school, we discuss this more in depth. Proofing off of food is no different than how I proof off a toy or how I'll proof off a distraction. Proofing is proofing. You just have to set up your requirements for the dog to be the same no matter what the proofing item is. Now, will food intrinsically be more valuable? Yes, absolutely. So you may need more repetitions in that cycle, you know, when I'm going into that how-to part of proofing a dog off of food or a toy or, like I said, any number of items. But absolutely proofing a dog off of food in detection is not hard to do. It's just a matter of doing the process and being consistent with it. And again, it's no different than proofing a dog off of a toy item. Food or toy, if it's motivating for the dog, is going to be the same. Just because I use food doesn't mean the dog's going to be more motivated or more apt to alert to or indicate to food over something else. I'd have the same argument for toy. If I use a toy and I put that item out, wouldn't that dog have the tendency to indicate or tell me it's there if my training is not clear? It all comes down to what you reinforce and the clarity in which you train your dogs. And then kind of the last point I'll talk about when it comes to food is we gave the advantages, here are some of the disadvantages. Sometimes the disadvantages come into people fear the use of food for that last example I just gave, which was the proofing. Oh my gosh, if I use food, I'm gonna have a dog who's completely crazy for food. And there might be some dogs that are very motivated and very stimulated for food, so therefore I do have to have a plan and know how I'm going to work myself through that plan and keep it where the dog is reliable and reasonable with the food and still do his job in detection. And again, there's various techniques that you're going to use, but that's going to depend on the dog in front of you. I can't give you a blanket answer that works for every dog because not everything works for every dog. Just like for us when we learn, not everything works for me like it works for somebody else when they learn. So one of the things is, you know, I'm afraid of my dog's going to alert to food, and again, that goes back to that proofing item. The next thing is, it dovetails into that same thing, is false alerts. Oh, my dog will be more apt to give false alerts because the fact that I used food. And that's not necessarily true. Again, depending on how you train, and are you clear about the conditions of what you're training the dog to do? Are you presenting food out there as a distraction item? Are you presenting food in a way that the dog understands in order to get the food, they have to find the odor? And we have to be clear about our training so that way we avoid those pitfalls. Another disadvantage could be a dog goes into what I call food-seeking behavior. So they come into a space and all they want to do is go hunt for food. Again, I go back to what was the clarity of the dog's training? Did the dog understand that the only way to get the food item was by finding target odor? And I have videos on that, and that's a part of what we utilize that's called delayed conditioning, where I teach the dog that the only way to get the food item is to be in odor first, then they get the food item. Now, like I said, with puppies, we are playing games where the dog is hunting and it's hunting for food, but the specific what isolation thing I'm looking for when I teach that is hunting behavior. It's nothing to do with detection. Later on, that skill that I'm building utilizing food will fall into detection. So again, not necessarily a disadvantage for me, but you have to be very clear about your training. That's how you get through this. One of the things I see is a common error when using food, and then that becomes a disadvantage, is constantly dropping the food on the ground as your reward. So a lot of games are done where you put an item there, the dog sniffs at it, stares at it, you pull the item back, or you leave it there, you drop food on top of it. That's probably the common one. So as the food hits the ground, it rolls away, the dog runs after it gets food, comes back to here, focuses on it, drop food. A byproduct that might come from that is the dog starts looking at the ground frequently for food because it has found food on the ground loose and expects to find that. So the context, the dog thinks the ground is a common place to find food, again, directly related to how you train the dog in your communication system and the steps that you used in that food training. So I will say be careful about dropping food on the ground as your delivery method when using food, because that can be a disadvantage. Also, the kind of, again, tailing into that is hunting only for food. Again, back to the point of your training needs to be clear that the only way to get to food is simply finding odor. Be very clear in the very beginning that the only way that you get this food item is being at odor first. And the more that you do that, a lot of these errors go away. And then one other advantage, or disadvantage, I would say, that comes up that I see frequently, more so on the sport world than on the professional world, but I've seen it in both, is a lot of focus to the handler because you've been the food ATM machine and they know you have the food. So they pay a lot of attention to you to try to do things to get food from you. But just like everything else I said, the clarity of your training, making sure that the dog understands the only pathway to whatever the reward item is, food, toy, whatever, pets, love, whatever you want to do, the only way that that reinforcer happens is when they find odor first. So utilizing a system that creates clarity reduces the disadvantages of food. Is food good for every dog? Absolutely not. There is no always, and there is no always and a never. So I have to be flexible as a trainer to utilize these tools to my advantage and train the dog in front of me. The more I focus on understanding that dog in front of me and training that dog, the better result I'm going to have with that dog. But by having that flexibility of utilizing toy, utilizing food, utilizing them in conjunction with each other when I need to, gives me more options to have a better dog that understands odor pays. So I hope that answers the question. And don't forget, if you like this information or if you have more questions, please, first, if you have a comment about this post or about this video, drop it down below in the comment section. I'd love to hear from you. You can tell me I'm a complete idiot and that you think using a food is the worst thing ever. Good. Give us the reasons why using food is horrible, what you've seen, because we all have different experiences. If you love using food, I want to hear from you too. What's the advantages that you have seen utilizing food? But remember, please like and subscribe, click below. If you want more information like this or more detailed information on how we utilize food in our training at Ford Canine, go visit our website, www.fordcanine.com, and I'll see you guys in the next one.